Someone at a restaurant table says 7 words, and the internet loses its mind. The 7 words are this: I cannot afford that right now. That is it. That is the whole thing. 7 words. Said out loud. In front of other people. And somehow, in the year 2026, that sentence has become one of the most viral financial trends on the planet. It has a name. Millions of people are doing it. Financial experts are talking about it on every major platform. News channels are running segments about it. They are calling it loud budgeting. And before you dismiss this as another TikTok trend that will be forgotten in 3 weeks, I want you to understand something. What these millions of young people have accidentally rediscovered is not new. It is ancient. The Stoic philosophers were practicing loud budgeting before the concept of a budget even existed. Before money in its modern form existed. Before social media, influencer culture, or the pressure to look wealthy on a Tuesday evening at a restaurant you cannot actually afford. Epictetus said it directly. He said that it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. And for the last 2 decades, most of us thought we already knew how to handle money. We thought the goal was to spend freely and quietly. To never let anyone see the gap between what we earn and what we project. To perform wealth even when wealth was not there. That performance is over. At least for the people who are paying attention. Welcome to the Stoic Millionaire. This channel exists at the intersection of ancient Stoic philosophy and modern financial psychology. Because what is happening right now with loud budgeting is not just a trend, it is a shift. A psychological shift in how an entire generation thinks about money. And if you understand the philosophy underneath it, you can use it to build something that lasts long after the trend has moved on. Subscribe if you have not already. Share this with someone who has ever felt embarrassed to say they cannot afford something, because that embarrassment has been costing them far more than the thing they bought to avoid it. Let us begin. Picture a man. He is 28 years old. He works in tech. He earns a decent salary. Decent enough that, on paper, he should be building something. But every Friday night, he is at a restaurant he cannot really afford. Every weekend, he is at an event that costs more than his grocery budget. Every holiday, he is buying gifts that go on a credit card he will spend the next 3 months paying down. Not because he wants these things, because he is afraid. Afraid of what his friends will think if he says no. Afraid of missing out on experiences that everyone else seems to be having effortlessly. Afraid that if he admits he has a budget, they will see him differently. That they will think less of him. That the version of himself he has carefully constructed will start to come apart. So he keeps saying yes. To dinners. To trips. To rounds of drinks. To every invitation that carries an unspoken financial expectation, and every yes costs him more than the price on the bill. It costs him the compound interest that money would have earned. It costs him the emergency fund he does not have. It costs him the months of retirement contributions he keeps telling himself he will start next quarter. He is not building a life. He is financing a performance. And the performance, like all performances, has an audience that never actually cared as much as he feared. Here is what the research shows. Studies on social spending consistently find the same result. The person saying yes to protect their image dramatically overestimates how much the other people at the table are judging them. Most of those people are too busy managing their own financial anxiety to notice or care about yours. The audience that is keeping you broke is largely imaginary. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this directly. He asked himself, regularly and honestly, How much of his behavior was designed to earn the approval of people whose approval he did not actually need? His answer was more than he was comfortable admitting, and that honesty changed how he lived. The man in our story eventually reaches a breaking point. Not a dramatic one, a quiet one. He is looking at his bank account on a Sunday afternoon, and the number he sees does not match the life he appears to be living. And for the first time, he asks himself the question that changes everything. Who exactly am I performing this for? The answer, when he sits with it honestly, is no one. No one in his life actually required this of him. He required it of himself. And that realization is the beginning of something entirely different. Let us get precise about what loud budgeting actually is. Because the viral version of it, the TikTok version, is real and worth taking seriously. But it is only the surface of something much deeper. At its most basic level, loud budgeting is the practice of openly acknowledging financial limits in social situations. Instead of quietly charging something you cannot afford to protect your image, you say the words, "I cannot afford that right now. That is not in my budget this month. I am sitting this one out." Simple. Direct. Without apology. And the reason it has gone viral is not because it is a new idea. It is because it breaks a social norm that has been quietly bankrupting people for decades. The norm that financial limits are shameful. The norm that saying no to spending means saying no to belonging. The norm that appearance of wealth is more important than the reality of it. Loud budgeting attacks all three of those norms simultaneously. And the Stoics would recognize this immediately. Because what loud budgeting is, in philosophical terms, is an act of what they called parrhesia. Parrhesia means speaking truth. Fearlessly. Even when the truth is uncomfortable. Even when the audience would prefer a more flattering version of events. The Stoics believed that parrhesia was not just a virtue. It was a financial necessity. Because the alternative, the silent performance, requires constant expenditure. Not just of money. Of energy. Of attention. Of mental bandwidth that could be going towards something that actually matters. Epictetus made this point with characteristic directness. He said that if you wish to be free, you must not fear the things that other men fear. And what most people fear, more than job loss, more than market crashes, more than almost any financial event, is social judgment. The fear of being seen as less. The fear of exclusion. The fear that the carefully maintained image of having it together will collapse the moment someone finds out you have a budget. That fear is the most expensive thing most people will ever carry. Because it is the fear that keeps the credit card balance growing, the fear that makes people buy things they do not want, with money they do not have, to impress people they do not particularly like. Loud budgeting is the practice of laying down that fear, of saying, clearly and without drama, that this is where I am, and that is enough. The research backs this up powerfully. Studies consistently show that people who speak openly about financial limits report significantly lower financial stress, not because their situation changed, because the gap between their public persona and their private reality closed. And it is that gap, not the debt itself, that causes the most psychological damage. When the performance ends, the anxiety begins to lift. That is not a trend. That is ancient wisdom, rediscovered by a generation that needed it. So how do you actually build this practice? Because the viral version of loud budgeting, saying the words once on a video, and calling yourself financially enlightened, is not enough. The Stoic version is a daily discipline, built in layers, starting with the inside before it touches the outside. The first layer is what the Stoics called the examined life. Before you can say, "I cannot afford that comfortably in public," you need to know what you actually can and cannot afford. Not in a vague, approximate way. In a precise, honest, written-down way. Most people have never done this. They have a general feeling about their finances. A sense that things are tight or comfortable. But they have never sat with the actual numbers. Written them down, named every category. Looked at the gap between income and outgo without blinking. Start there. Before anything else. Because loud budgeting without an actual budget is just performance. The second layer is pre-commitment language. The Stoics practiced what they called the evening review. Each night, Marcus Aurelius would ask himself 3 questions. What did I do well today? What could I have done better? And what will I do differently tomorrow? Applied to social spending, this looks like this. Before any social event, you decide in advance what you will and will not spend. You set the number. You write it down. And you prepare the language you will use if the situation goes beyond that number. Not defensive language. Not apologetic language. Simple, clear, matter-of-fact language. I am keeping my spending tight this month. I have already reached my dining out budget for the week. That is not something I am doing right now. No explanation required. No justification owed. No performance of regret or aspiration to make other people comfortable. Just the truth. Stated as plainly as any other fact about yourself. The third layer is community curation. This is perhaps the most Stoic of all the tools, because the Stoics understood that people around you shape your values more than any philosophy you read. Epictetus was blunt about this. He said that you will find yourself spending time with people who match your values. Or you will find yourself abandoning your values to match theirs. There is no neutral ground. If every social circle you belong to is organized around spending that exceeds your means, loud budgeting is not enough. You need to find people for whom financial honesty is normal. People who have the same conversation about money that you are trying to have. People whose social life is not primarily organized around expensive restaurants and exclusive events. This is not about eliminating anyone from your life. It is about diversifying your social portfolio the same way you diversify a financial one, so that the default assumption of every social situation is not that everyone will spend beyond their means. The fourth layer is what I call the Stoic upgrade. Every time you say no to something you cannot afford, you do not just note it and move on. You redirect that money. Immediately. Automatically. You transfer the money you would have spent to a savings account before you have a chance to spend it on something else. This is the mechanical consequence of a philosophical position. Saying no to the dinner is not just restraint. It is an investment decision. And the money should move immediately to reflect that. Over time, this creates something more powerful than willpower. It creates evidence. Evidence that your values and your finances are aligned. Evidence that the version of you making financial decisions is the same person who says they care about their future. That alignment is worth more than any single investment, because it is the foundation everything else is built on. Let us go back to the man. The Sunday afternoon where the bank balance does not match the life he is performing. He makes a decision that evening. Not to be dramatic about it. Not to announce a financial transformation on social media. Just to stop performing. The next Friday, at dinner with his usual group, Someone suggests splitting a bottle of wine that costs more than his grocery budget. And he says it. 7 words. I cannot afford that right now. And then something unexpected happens. Nothing. The table does not go silent. His friends do not look at him differently. One of them actually laughs with recognition and says they were thinking the same thing. Another one admits they have been watching their spending too. The conversation moves on. The dinner continues. And the bottle of wine gets replaced with individual drinks that everyone can actually afford. What he expected to be a moment of social exposure turns out to be an opening. A permission structure. A space for everyone at the table to stop performing together. This is what the research on loud budgeting consistently finds. When one person in a social group speaks openly about financial limits, it dramatically increases the likelihood that others will follow. Not because they were waiting for permission, because they were terrified of being first. The person who speaks first carries a social cost, but they also unlock something for everyone around them. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when you wake up in the morning, you can tell yourself that today I will encounter people who are meddlesome, ungrateful, arrogant, and dishonest. But you should also tell yourself that none of these people can harm you if you do not allow them to. The financial version of this is equally true. The people around you cannot keep you broke if you stop allowing the fear of their judgment to make your spending decisions. Loud budgeting is not a trend. It is parrhesia, truth-telling. Applied to the part of your life that has been most governed by fiction. The fiction that you are fine. The fiction that everyone else is managing effortlessly. The fiction that saying I cannot afford that means you have failed somehow. You have not failed. You have just stopped performing. And in the space that opens up when the performance ends, something real can finally begin. Not a version of your financial life that impresses people who barely think about you. A version of your financial life that actually works. Quietly. Consistently. With the kind of solidity that does not need an audience. If this video gave you something real, share it. Someone in your life is spending money. They do not have to protect an image they do not need. They need to hear that there is another way. Subscribe to this channel. Every week we go deeper into the philosophy and psychology of building lasting wealth. Not by performing success. By actually building it. We will see you in the next one.